You're listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Dr. Alex and Megan of ZESTY Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you've definitely come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and best friends, we use the 4 phases of the female cycle in combination with functional lab work and mindset practices to transform the lives of the women we work with.
We also have a whole lot of fun along the way. If you're new around here, it's best to start with season 1 before jumping around and plan to roll up your sleeves. Showing up for ourselves and enjoying our lives is what good health is all about. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your doctor before making changes.
Hello, lovely humans. Alex here for day 11 of our Flowing With Your Cycle podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, don't forget about our companion guide for this series. That is over at zestyginger.com/flow. And we've gotten many messages from you all about what's coming up, what you're realizing as you do the things that are in that companion guide as you go through this series, and we are living for it. Thank you so much. I just get so jazzed about it, so I really appreciate it. All right, so day 11, what is the dealio here? So we've talked a lot about some very big concepts in phase 2, right? Because dynamic change and moving your life forward, well, most of us say that that's exactly what we want, right? Many of us are saying, I want what I want as fast as I want it, as fast as humanly possible, right? And I am no different in that regard. And in fact, I'm probably more on the spectrum of just being impatient, wanting things to unfold really quickly. And at the same time, it can definitely bring up a lot of internal discrepancies that we have to go through change, especially as it becomes more rapid. And because that's the goal, it's not a question of how do you slow down change, though you totally can if that's what you want. But because most people aren't like that, it becomes more of a question of how do I process the change and up level accordingly with that change so that I can keep moving in the direction that I want and also have the best experience along the way. The only caveat to this that I will say is that there is a time and a place for slowing down or reassessing, even if you are in the category of I want to move forward and I consciously choose to fast track, right? Many of the women we work with are very high achieving women, right? You have careers, you have families, you have businesses, you have dreams, there's a lot going on. And many of you like it that way. And I totally understand where you're coming from, right? And so if that's the case, this is where this work really comes in. And also just a reminder is that, and I am totally saying this to myself as I say it as well, is that there are times where speed and kind of forward motion isn't what we need, right? And so the cycle highlights that beautifully, right? Because there are times for going inwards and slowing down and all of that. And so that's cool. But this is also true on a bigger trajectory where there are some years, for example, there are some years where Megan and I in our business make really big moves, and that does create very rapid up-leveling and the growing pains that come with up-leveling. And then we have years where we're like, you know what, it's time to really integrate, feel into, tweak, do more of that work on a bigger scale, right? So it's not that during those, let's say we have a year where we're really integrating everything and letting things gel and making improvements and all of that. The focus is not always on massive action, though, we have the cycles that we are flowing with. And so, of course, there's massive action in that, and it looks a little bit different at times, sometimes than other times, right? So there are you're starting to see that there's different layers of this. There's like daily experiences, right? There's cycle-long, month-long experiences, and then sometimes there's more. Sometimes we can have multiple years where things are a certain way, like when you have a newborn, and then you go to a different place. So even though we're focusing on 28 days here, it's always helpful to sort of zoom out and look at that bigger picture just to make sure we are truly allowing ourselves to get what we need at that moment and not pigeonholing ourselves into a certain way of being. Even if we decided we want to be that way, right? Having a year where you integrate is not a bad thing if you're doing it intentionally. And sometimes what happens that we see is that people feel like, okay, I want to fast track all the time, and therefore I'm going to push myself that hard. Sometimes it becomes involuntary to slow down, and that is a very different kind of experience and often less satisfying, less fun, and feels more out of control than many of us would choose to have, right? So yes, we are in the phase of massive action. There's going to be up leveling, cool, but let's put it into that context and make sure that we are really honoring where we're at and what we need at any given time, right? So today we're going to talk about, as you set things in motion for the couple things that you have set as the big picture goals, and then in this phase, you're starting to figure out which couple of action items are going to make the most impact in the direction that you are moving, right? What's cool about this process is that as we make movements like that, it is always going to give us feedback. So the thing to recognize is that a lot of us are concerned about making massive changes and wonder if they're the right thing or not, right? This concept of doing the right thing is one that I have really been impacted by, and I think that many high achievers are essentially programmed and conditioned, by becoming that. There has almost always been certain inputs in our environment that have told us, well, this is the right way to do it. If you follow these steps, you get X, right? And then society looks at you and says, oh, look, you did X, Y, Z, therefore you are, whatever kind of person. And because of that, it's really easy to just sort of like set something, put your head down, and plow on through. And yes, staying in the moment is always a good idea, right? If you're like, I want 50 million followers and you have 8,000, looking at how far away from 50 million followers you are every single day is going to feel pretty crappy because you're always like, I'm far away, right? So putting one foot in front of the other and being like, all right, 8,000 today, a month later it's 9,000, and up you go. And then intermittently, then that's why phase one exists. You lift your head up, look around, see how you're doing, make some tweaks, decide on where you're going, right? So that is the kind of motion that can happen where you're really balancing when you're choosing to see and look into the bigger picture, and when it is best to sort of get that sort of granular, let's just do what I need to do today, and then enjoy the process in the meantime, which looks like rest, fun, joy, things that make you happy, hanging out with people, right? Just kind of filling the time with things that you like and not so much obsessing about how far you are from where you want to be. And yes, that is so much easier said than done. I totally am with you. But that interplay definitely exists. So as we start to make shifts, we get the feedback of whether we like what is happening or not, right? And that is really reassuring if you're someone that worries about doing the right thing, because after a little while, people start to realize that nothing, almost nothing, is set in stone. So there are things that we can do to rectify situations if we get someplace and realize that is not where we want to go. And also, most people find that it becomes a trust issue. So for us, and then the people that come back and talk to us, they're like, I was worried about that being right, because part and parcel with being right is that if I get there, I haven't trusted myself and really haven't really listened to myself to know, is that really the direction I want to head? And now I'm worried that if I get there, I just won't be able to handle whatever is on that side, right? It'll be so wrong that I won't even be able to manage it. Right? And that level of fear then, with that belief, of course, keeps us really trapped sometimes. So, with the cycles in mind, it really helps remind us that we have tools where we can tap into ourselves so that we can have the power to sustain whatever it is that happens in our life. And also, the cycles remind us that there's just the next cycle after that, right? So even if something on the surface looks like we colossally messed it up, and I've absolutely been there, at that point, I like to remind myself that just means the story's not done here, right? It's like I still have tomorrow and the next day and the next month and then the next year to see how this all unfolds and steer the ship in the direction that I want it to go. Therefore, even something that looks wrong at that time has the capacity to change. Right? So it's like the Abraham Hicks, the saying that they mention all the time. It's like you can't get it wrong and you can't get it done, and the reason it's never wrong is that it's never done. Right? And so this is one of those things that is really helpful to keep in mind as we go through transitions, because it's very reassuring to know that our arbitrary end point that we tend to set in our head, whatever that is helpful to have timelines and goals and put end dates on them and stuff like that. But really, in the grand scheme of things, even if we fall short on any given thing, we can recognize that it was us who set that, and it is us that can be responsive and reactive to making it something else over time. So that is a big portion of the name of the game here for phase 2, is really just having the insight as we move through things of what is the reality, whatever that is, right? What is true for us on that bigger level? And that's why this is preceded by phase 1. What is true for us on a bigger level, and what are the things that we got taught and conditioned to believe that do not serve us, right? Thinking that you always mess stuff up kind of creates a situation where our brain is looking for that kind of thing in our environment, and we tend to recreate the scenarios that already confirm what we believe about ourselves. So part of that change is really being conscientious of the circles and the loops that our brain is going to run as a protective mechanism. But even with protection, sometimes it's a little bit misguided, right? Because the things that keep us, quote, protected often also keep us small, which means that we are not in alignment with the bigger aspect of ourselves that came here to do really big, really important, really loving things. And that's why it's so important to have this kind of insight into what's going on. So how do you know, or how do you kind of perceive that feedback? So I'm going to share something that works really well for me. This may not jive for everyone. I totally understand that. But generally speaking, what I have found is that when you are flowing in the direction of something that feels very true and aligned for you, right? When you were sitting and doing the assessment in phase 1, like what really jazzed you, right? And what felt right to pursue. And then there's another opportunity as you think of, what am I going to do today to move it forward? How is it that you feel around it, right? Now, we can have doubts and fears about something because it can be a little intimidating, but when things feel good to us on a certain level, like you have that resonance, maybe it shows up as a feeling in your stomach, like it relaxes, or all of a sudden you start having creative ideas, or it makes you smile, or just you feel the upliftment of your emotions from, negativity or neutral up to whatever a higher emotional state would be for you at that time. Right? So there's lots of different ways that we can have feedback on that, but generally speaking, every time we are considering something, it's an opportunity then to tune in and say, how do I feel about that? And using that as just another way to guide yourself. Right? That's not to say we don't have our conscious mind to work with and make decisions around. I think sometimes people kind of leave out aspects. They're like, we overthink too much, just go by your gut. And really, it's like we have both faculties. We have tools at our disposal. Why not use all of them to the greatest extent in whatever way works for us? So some of us are more into the feeling, some of us are more into the knowing, some of us are more into the vision, some of us more into whatever it is that you see, or however you gather information. But all of those aspects are absolutely available, and really it's up to us to be like, I have a whole buffet. How do I want to use this, right? So when we feel into it like that, this is where taking the step is like us saying, yes, I want to move in this direction. I believe in it. This is what I want. And then allowing the universe, this is part of the beauty of kind of the feminine receptive mode. And it doesn't matter which gender we are, we all have that feminine capacity. But, as females, then when we have that receptive, like, the universe, or however you conceptualize it, meets us part of the way and begins to unfold things, that's where we can start to see externally the ease and flow that is present in whichever direction we're moving. So sometimes what happens is we figure out what we want and we start making movements toward it. And then this is where paying attention to what unfolds next as we kind of find the balance between us driving where we want to go and taking some of the first steps, and then also monitoring as things unfold, how do I feel about what is happening? Oftentimes, what we have found, what we've heard from our ladies, is that when things really resonate with us, that's already our first clue that it's likely going to unfold in kind of the least complicated, least painful way possible. Depending on the situation, it could be, super not fun still, because some things are just hard even if they're wrong, or if they're right. Sorry. Sometimes things are hard even when they're the right thing to do. Even if that's the case, there's a certain link between really feeling like something is right for you and then taking the actions towards it, and then really watching for how easily are things falling into place around it. That is not to say there's not going to be bumps along the road anytime you're going someplace. Even with health, we've shared pretty openly. Megan and I had some super big bumps. And still, once we got onto the track where it was like we were incorporating the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, all of it, we resonated so much with that things really started to unfold, and the trajectory just completely sped up because that we were flowing with the direction of the river. We weren't trying to sort of like find other different pathways and artificially make the trails for ourselves, which feels exhausting and frustrating. The external environment then mirrored the trajectory that we were on and amplified our ability to get there. And so as you make movements, consider maybe in the note section of your phone or in an actual notebook, just keeping track of, as you make movements, what happens. So sometimes, I'll give you an example. Sometimes Megan and I will intend to learn something, right? We will say this is an aspect of our business that we want to be better around, and we are going to look for an opportunity to do that. Now, as you probably know, on the internet and stuff, you can find a million different people to do a million different things. And so, how do you pick? How do you go with the person that is going to help you the most, like that you drive with, that you're going to have a good experience with? There's just a lot of things that can go into it. Like, are they going to help you get to where you need to go? This is where, as we have that clarity around it, and we really decide what we're doing, why we're doing it, where it's taking us, and we figure out the high leverage steps to start to move us in the direction, we may not actually know the full map, right? We may not have all of the steps. But what happens is that we're like, okay, let's put feelers out in this group that we're in, or this person that we know, or whatever, right? Then that's the invitation for more information coming in. So we take that step, and then this is where you let it unfold. And if you're impatient like me, that step's a little hard, but that's part of the game sometimes. And then you see what people come up with, because a lot of times what happens, it goes like, when we're really onto something, is that it's like, oh, that person we talked to knew the exact person who does that one thing that we have in our business that other people don't tend to have, and they're the only ones teaching it that way. And plus, oh, by the way, it happens to be in 2 weeks. They only open it once a year. It's not always the way, as easy as I just described it, in that, yeah, sometimes there's hard decisions to make, like when we found the perfect mastermind and then realized it was tens of thousands of dollars that we hadn't yet made, right? And then we were like, do we believe in ourselves enough to invest in ourselves? And the answer was yes, and we massively up-leveled. But it was just one of those things where we said it. I happened to get a random email from a person I randomly heard on a podcast that I really liked. And then they were opening up for a mastermind, and I clicked the link, and someone called me, and it just kind of went like that. Was it still scary to make the decision? Yeah, that is not big movement. Sometimes requires courage, but that's the whole point, right? If you didn't have the fear, you wouldn't need the courage. So it's part and parcel with that, and doesn't represent something that has gone wrong in the process. It just means that part can be difficult, but when the other things are flowing like that, that is reassuring that we are also in the flow of everyone else and everything else interfacing with where we want to get to. Because it's easy to feel like we're in a vacuum with things and that we're on our own journey, but the truth of the matter is, when we zoom out, we are so interconnected with others. Every time we up-level, every time we heal, every time that we become more powerful and trusting of ourselves and really stand in our own authenticity, we impact those around us. We model for people. We give them ideas. We start to really co-create with those around us, and sometimes in ways that we don't even have any conscious awareness of. That doesn't mean it's not happening, right? And that's why when we're in the flow, we're in the flow for the good of everyone, not just those involved, but literally, in our belief, literally everyone, because one person beginning to live in alignment is always going to be impactful, right? That's like, this is kind of the flip side of this, but it's like saying you're in a forest, and this is on my mind because I live in Oregon and it's really dry and there's forest fires, but it's like saying one tree catching fire, like, then it's going to be in a vacuum, right? And catching fire can be like massively transforming, right? it starts to trickle out to all the other people around you just one at a time, and in ways that you can't even really tell, right? So, there's probably not the best analogy, but that's essentially what I'm trying to say, is that it's what is really truly good for your spirit is really truly good for the world many times, right? Because what's good for our spirit is stuff like love, alignment, unity, joy, compassion, understanding, growth, evolution, all of those things that are beautiful are shared experiences on the planet. All right, so that is the podcast for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I really super appreciate seeing the screenshots that you're sharing me, so keep those coming. And if there are women in your life that you feel like could benefit from this information, please share. I think that there's so many of us that are really looking for some sort of framework that'll help us find that ease and flow in our life. So if you know someone that could benefit from that, please share. I really, really appreciate it. Alrighty, have a great day. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for coming out to hang with us on the podcast. It is our goal to transform the way women are treated in healthcare. And we need your help. We need your help to get the word out. We have a lofty goal of 1 million downloads. And we know that as this podcast grows, we're going to be able to reach more women, get more amazing speakers for you, and bring the most cutting-edge information.
If you found these podclasses helpful, please take a moment to text 5 women you know the link to the series. We appreciate your help so much. Can't wait to see you next time.